If you've been feeling stuck with themes of perfectionism, hypervigilance, chronic overthinking, at least more so than normal, or you're still stuck with the potentially chaotic themes of the Aquarius solar eclipse relatable, this is the video for you, because trust me when I say that this lunar eclipse in Virgo, which is happening on March 3rd, will more than address these themes in your life and give you the chance to rectify these themes. But you're probably wondering, how will this eclipse look for me? Because that's why I clicked on this silly video, you random astrology lady. And before we get into your personalized forecast, which don't worry, I do have a very personalized forecast for you, let's dissect what this transit could look like on a larger scale. Because a lunar eclipse is a highly concentrated full moon that brings our deeply ingrained emotional cycles to a sudden peak and forces a necessary shedding of the habits, attachments, or routines that we have outgrown. And so what's to be said when this eclipse happens in Virgo? Well, funny that you ask, because the energetic focus targets our relationship with control, analysis, and the pursuit of perfection. Virgo, which is ruled by Mercury, is an archetype that values practical and thoughtful application. But this eclipse will be notably conjoining the South Node. Major distinction to be made here, because remember, when it comes to transits, the South Node functions as an energetic drain and a point of necessary release. And so the transiting South Node sweeps through our current lives to reveal exactly where we are holding on to dead weight. And so, with the lunar eclipse in Virgo tied to the South Node doing a little dancey dance, there is a clear mandate to let go of hypervigilance and the need to micromanage every detail. And so this eclipse can manifest as a period where the systems, routines, and analytical frameworks we use to manage our lives may reveal their limitations, either through external triggers or internal realizations. This sensation can feel very critical, but in actuality, it is likely pulling you to necessary uncluttering. It asks us to recognize where we are overworking the details or becoming immobilized by criticism, and it encourages us to release the rigid structures that no longer serve our practical purpose. And perhaps with the opposition to the Sun, the North Node, and a very loose opposition to a lot of Pisces planets, it's a Pisces stellium going on here, whatever we are being called to release is actually gonna be kind of illuminated through an external factor, one that may be Piscean in nature. It could be a piece of information that completely shatters your reality, a person or a situation with others, or maybe even with life in general that calls for grace. Or perhaps it's a new visceral understanding of a new spiritual and compassionate truth that defies what logically makes sense in some area of our life. But no matter how this energy presents, being ready is key, because there is a sextile as well to Jupiter in Cancer. And so the feelings will be abundant, and you gotta let yourself feel them if you're gonna take the lesson of this eclipse. And so with all of that background being said, I have multiple forecasts for you down in the description below. Find your placements, because this will help you not only understand, what's going to happen during this eclipse, but also how to manage it, how it's going to, play out internally, but also what you can do to best prepare for this energy so that you do not sink, but instead you swim or you fly, whatever you want to do. And so now that we have that out of the way, go down to the description, look for your placements, and let's get to the heart of the matter in 3, 2, 1, go. Aries Rising, for you, this lunar eclipse in Virgo is happening in your 6th house of daily rituals, physical health, maybe work assignments, and the systematic order of your life. That's kind of what this house touches on. And because this eclipse is conjunct the South Node, the sensation could be one of exhaustion with your own efficiency, and you could feel a somatic heaviness, specifically in your gut or in your nervous system, signaling that the way that you have been keeping it all together is actually the thing that could be tearing you apart in some way. And so internally, this could be a crisis of competence. You could feel a sudden, sharp intolerance for your own perfectionism, or a realization that your current productivity is fueled by anxiety rather than purpose. Externally, though, this energy could manifest as a disruption in the workplace or a health flare up that maybe forces a pause. Not anything serious, obviously, but maybe you just feel like burnt out due to external factors, if that makes sense. And then the loose opposition to the Pisces stellium in the 12th house could suggest that while your conscious mind is trying to analyze the data and fix the glitch, maybe your subconscious is flooding with a need for rest, surrender, or even spiritual disillusion. And then the sextile to Jupiter in Cancer in your 4th house could add a layer of emotional fullness. Maybe your body is trying to tell you that safety doesn't have to come from doing more, it comes from nurturing the foundation or nurturing a core part of who you are. And so, on a personal level, you must separate your worth from your utility at this time. The South Node in Virgo in the 6th kind of asks you to release the need to be the fixer. And when the anxiety rises, asking you to check the list one more time, your practice is to literally try to do nothing when it isn't needed, unless, it'll get you fired. Then obviously do your job. But when you don't have to do anything, don't do it. Lean into the 12th house polarity. Sleep, meditate, stare at a wall whenever possible. Allow your nervous system to reset. The sextile to Jupiter in Cancer could suggest that maybe retreating to privacy or maybe retreating to your home or spending time with family without an agenda will be the ultimate medicine for you at this time. And on an external level, try to streamline your life ruthlessly. So if a task does not directly contribute to your survival or your basic well-being, cut it out. This is not the time to start a complex new diet or rigorous workout plan. It's the time to detox from the idea that you need to be optimized. And if the work is chaotic, let it be at least a little bit chaotic. Do what is required, but refuse to emotionally absorb the dysfunction of the system. And let the collapse of your perfect routine be the beginning of your actual well-being, so that whatever it is that you do, however you spend your energy, it's the actual impact, not just the idea of the blueprint, that can actually land in your life. Taurus Rising, this lunar eclipse falls in your 5th house of creative self expression, romance, pleasure, children. It's that childlike joy, but it's the house of creation above all else. And so, with the South Node involved with the lunar eclipse, the core sensation is maybe the realization that your fun has become, work in some way. You could feel a distinct dryness or sterility in areas where you usually find passion. And so, internally, this can feel like a writer's block, maybe a loss of libido, or a feeling that your creative output is being scrutinized under a microscope, whether by yourself or other people, or, this invisible, head floating in the sky. But you are also likely hyper analyzing how you are perceived when it comes to what you do create in some way. Or you could be critiquing your own joy, even if it's just critiquing the joy itself, before you even allow yourself to feel it. And the opposition to the Pisces stellium in your 11th house of community and networks could suggest that the pressure might be coming from a desire to fit in or to be validated by the group or society in some way. But this validation could feel increasingly hollow as we approach the eclipse. And so you are being asked to release the performative aspect of your happiness. And then the sextile to Jupiter in Cancer in your 3rd house can indicate that maybe your breakthrough at this time comes through simple, honest communication, or maybe local low stakes connections. Like maybe the answer is right in front of you, if that makes sense. And so, on a personal level, this is the time to stop curating your joy. The South Node in Virgo wants you to release the analysis of your happiness. If you are painting, paint poorly. If you are dating, stop trying to predict the outcome or hack the connection. Identify the voice in your head that says, I need to do this correctly to be loved, and recognize this voice, no matter what it's saying, as dead weight in your life. And then on an external level, especially in social situations, maybe stop trying to merge or to save the group or to, save society, or to feel that pressure, really stifling your joy. Maybe it's what's happening in the world right now that's stifling your joy in some way. Focus on your own immediate tangible expression where possible and use the Jupiter and Cancer third house energy. Maybe talk to people who surround you in your immediate environment or write in a private journal anytime you feel overwhelming emotional energy. And keep your expression very small, intimate, and protected from the public eye at this time. Don't post what you're going to post. Don't share it if you don't have to do it. Don't monetize it yet. Just feel it, because that is where you'll get the best results. Because your joy does not need a strategy. It just needs permission to exist very messily and unrefined. And that means giving love to whatever it is you create, even when it's in an incomplete form, because kind of like a flower, doing this will truly allow it to bloom. Gemini Rising, this is a pivotal eclipse for you. It's occurring in an angular house for you, the fourth house of home, family, roots, emotional foundations. And the South Node here kind of suggests a draining away of maybe old family karma, rigid domestic routines, or a need to control your private environment to manage your anxiety. Maybe your nervous system isn't doing all too great right now. And the sensation could be one of feeling unmoored or even homesick, even when you're sitting in your living room. Like maybe you don't feel like you belong in some full way. And you could feel a frantic need to maybe clean, organize, fix your home, or to even fix your mind, if that makes sense. Maybe fix your conditioning. It could be more internal. But the underlying emotion existing is a deep, maybe even ancestral sense of unsettledness. And the opposition to the Pisces stellium happening in your 10th house of career, legacy, could put you in a bind. Maybe the world is calling for your empathy and your vision, or maybe you're just dreaming of what you can accomplish in this world. But at this time, maybe your home life, your innermost self, your roots will require a practical, analytical sense of dismantling. And so you're kind of releasing the role of the manager within, your innermost self or your family unit or your home. But with the sextile to Jupiter and Cancer in your second house as well, it's kind of this beautiful energy that could suggest that as you release domestic control, maybe your sense of self-worth, or perhaps even in a literal sense, your financial resources could expand to support you in some way. And so on a personal level, you need to grieve maybe the perfect childhood or the perfect home that you never had, or maybe you're grieving what you want to have now, but maybe it isn't achieved yet, even if it's just a sense of belonging or security. And the South Node is really asking you to let go of the story of, maybe your past or even your current situation. Don't look at it from such a logistical standpoint. Deal with the reality in some way, because emotional safety is not found in a color-coded pantry or a big home, or having this perfect sense of rootedness. It is kind of found in the ability to be vulnerable and to be authentically yourself within your four walls. And Jupiter in the second house kind of says, buy the comfortable couch or spend money on the therapist. Invest in your own stability where possible, because I promise you, this is what is going to ground you at this time. And then on an external level, if maybe career demands or your ambitions feel overwhelming to you at this time, do not try to balance them by making your home life rigid or putting pressure on your time to rest and relax. Instead, allow your home or your innermost self to be soft, formless. Allow it to be a place of retreat, even if it's just for a short time. And set boundaries with family members if possible, who kind of expect you, maybe they expect you to be their secretary or your therapist. Set boundaries if this is the case for you, and hand the responsibility back to them so that you can take responsibility for yourself and stop trying to organize your sanctuary and start allowing yourself to actually inhabit it. Focus on the safety of your inner and outer world without the need to perfect it, and you may be surprised on how invigorated that can make you feel at this time. Cancer Rising, for you, this lunar eclipse in Virgo falls in your third house of communication, daily rituals. It can involve siblings, maybe neighbors, or at the very least, it is your immediate environment and how you process it. And because the South Node is involved, the sensation could be one of mental static, reaching a deafening volume. You could feel an intense pressure to explain yourself perfectly, to have the right answer, or to micromanage the perceptions of those in your immediate vicinity, or to micromanage your own thought processes as well. You could be very mentally busy at this time. And somatically, this could show up as anxiety, maybe in the chest or in the throat, or a tightness that could come from swallowing your intuitive truth as a Cancer rising, in favor of a more logical explanation that either pleases others or that fits in this neat little box that you've created. And the South Node conjoining this eclipse could be draining the energy from your need to be the smart one or the organized one, or to have, all of your thoughts together. And you could feel, a little bit burnt out or tired of the details at this time. Maybe you're tired of either constant texting, the email chains, or the petty grievances of daily life. And then the opposition to the Pisces stellium in the ninth house could suggest that while your mind is obsessing over cracks in the sidewalk or in your mind, maybe your soul is screaming for a wider, more compassionate view of the horizon. The saving grace for you is that there is a sextile to Jupiter transiting Cancer, which is in your first house. This could be massive for you because it suggests that by simply being yourself, embracing who you are, being very emotionally authentic, you can bypass this mental trap if you lean into this, because your physical presence and emotional honesty are going to be the antidote to your overthinking. And so, on a personal level, stop editing yourself. The South Node in Virgo in the third house wants you to curate your words until they are sterile. The antidote is to speak before you are ready. Let the thought be messy. If you feel the impulse to say something, do not run it through the "is this helpful" or "is this perfect" filter. Just say it. Lean into Jupiter in the first house, because your raw, unpolished emotion could actually be the most intelligent thing in the room right now. And on an external level, declutter your immediate input. This is the time to unsubscribe from newsletters, silence notifications, unfollow TikTok pages that make you overthink, and perhaps just take a few days of silence if needed. And if something around you is demanding logistical help and you don't feel like you have the mental capacity, it's okay to say, "I will do this later," or "I can't figure this out for you right now." Like, maybe stand up for yourself if you are being demanded for and you are really being asked to surrender the need to know everything. That is the summary, because your intelligence is not found in your ability to categorize the world, but in your ability to feel it. And so feeling it deeply may lead to a surrendering of your mind that can silence the voice that no longer suits your narrative. Leo rising, this lunar eclipse hits your second house of personal finances, earned income, possessions, self-worth, your intangible, possessions, anything that you own, whether abstract or literal, that's a second house. And so with the South Node here as well, the sensation is a deep gnawing insecurity about enoughness, if that makes sense. So you could feel a sudden constriction around money, not necessarily because you lack it, although everybody's different, but maybe because you're hyper analyzing your security right now more than normal. You could feel like you are walking a tightrope, convinced that one small error in judgment will lead to ruin in some way. And somatically, this lives maybe in the jaw or in the stomach. It's the places where we digest our reality and hold on to our resources. And the Virgo energy here has likely had you budgeting, saving, or organizing your life to a fault, perhaps treating your own talents as commodities that must be optimized. You have to do better if you want to be worth more. This could be, a theme that you're thinking of a lot at this time. And then the opposition to the Pisces stellium in your eighth house of shared resources calls you to surrender to the flow of exchange. You cannot control every penny that comes in and goes out, and you cannot control, every little resource that enters your life. And so the sextile as well to Jupiter and Cancer in your 12th house is also going to be particularly mystical for you, because it suggests that help could be coming from unseen places. Because if you let go of the grip of the steering wheel, maybe spiritual protection or sudden downloads to your subconscious that really help you purge out those beliefs that make you feel like you're not enough, or maybe like some hidden benefactor comes into play, this could save you or at least ensure that you do not crash. So, on a personal level, practice radical generosity with yourself. That is the number one tip because the South Node in Virgo is sort of like the one who saves the good candles for a special occasion that never comes, or the one who, budgets their skills because they never think it's enough. Like maybe you don't put yourself out there because you think you got to be better before you do that. I relate to this as a Leo rising. But you are being told to, indulge in your skills, indulge in what you own right now, use that expensive lotion, burn the candles, put your skills out there, break that scarcity mindset by proving to your subconscious that you are abundant in the now. It's not something that you got to work for and you'll reach it later. And Jupiter in the 12th house is your guardian angel. Trust that there is a safety net, maybe that you cannot see. On an external level as well, stop looking at your bank account 5 times a day, or stop, hyper analyzing your worth 100 times a day. If you are in maybe a financial tangle right now, the solution is not going to be more analysis. It is likely found in maybe asking for help or merging resources, or, surrendering to the flow of life in some way until a better solution can come to you. Maybe allow someone else to pick up the check, or allow a partner to support you without feeling like you failed, or just like leave it to the universe to provide you with the answers that you need, because your worth is not a calculation that needs to be solved. It is an inherent fact to be accepted. And so this is going to be your mantra to remind yourself of at this time, especially if you want to be able to embrace your worth and emotionally turn over a new leaf. Virgo rising, this is your eclipse because it is happening in your first house of self, body, vitality, and interface with the world. And because it is on the South Node, this is a massive shedding of skin for you. Maybe you're literally exhausted by being you in some way. And so the sensation can feel like a heavy physical weariness with a role that you play maybe in everybody else's life. Maybe you're the fixer, the healer, the organized one, the one who notices the detail, the one that's really good at advice, the helpful one. Whatever your label is, maybe you feel physically invisible, or conversely, hyper exposed, as if people are seeing the cracks in your armor for the first time, or maybe your armor doesn't feel like it has a use at this time, which could make you feel maybe like you're not as important as you know you should be. And somatically, this could be felt as a need for sleep, or even in a literal sense, it could be a sudden intolerance for your own grooming or your appearance or your routines, or maybe just like your view of yourself could maybe feel like it needs an overhaul, if that makes sense. And you don't just want to keep it up anymore. And the opposition to the Pisces stellium in your 7th house puts the spotlight on your relationships. Others are acting as mirrors potentially right now, or maybe your idea of connection is acting as a mirror because it's reflecting back a need for compassion and blurriness that your rigid first house identity could struggle to accept at times. And then the sextile to Jupiter in Cancer in the 11th house could be your lifeline, maybe your friends, your network, your greater community, social media, your role in society. These could be resources that you can lean on at this time, but only if you stop trying to serve them and you let them serve you in some way. On a personal level, retire from being the general manager of the universe, because the South Node in your first house is asking you to kill a version of yourself that needs to be perfect to be loved. Allow yourself to be messy, late, or wrong. And if you feel the urge to apologize for simply existing in a non-optimized state, swallow it. Jupiter in the 11th house says that your true belonging comes when you show your community your humanity, not your efficiency. You don't need to prove yourself at this time, even if you feel the urge to do so. And on an external level, when you walk in a room, try to do nothing. Do not straighten the picture frame. Do not offer to clean up the dishes. Don't feel like you have to say something to prove yourself. Don't give unsolicited advice. Sit on your hands if you have to, and observe how comfortable it makes you feel not to be contributing, and sit with that discomfort until it passes. Because you are allowed to exist without a function. You are allowed to be a person, not a project. And so whatever you do, look in the mirror. Acknowledge your soul before doing any task at this time, so that however you do it, you can allow your true impact to land instead of getting caught up in the wrong things. Libra rising, for you, this lunar eclipse in Virgo takes place in the hidden, foggy, and psychological terrain of your 12th house. And because this is the house of the subconscious, sleep, isolation, and undoing. The sensation of this eclipse is less about an external event, although maybe an external event could trigger something that you didn't see coming more internally, but it definitely is going to be more about a deafening internal noise no matter how it presents to you. And the South Node here suggests that maybe you've been trying to manage, in quotation marks, manage your mental health, maybe your spiritual practice, or your anxieties with a clipboard and a checklist. You could feel a very deep sense of mental exhaustion or a sort of spiritual burnout where you are tired of trying to fix yourself. Somatically, this energy can live in your sleep patterns. You might experience vivid anxiety, maybe some intense dreams, insomnia, or a waking feeling of disassociation as if your brain is trying to process too much data in the background, but you don't consciously know what that is, and you're like trying to figure out what it is, and that's burning you out. But the opposition to the Pisces stellium in your sixth house of daily work and health kind of creates a jarring contrast. Maybe the external world is demanding that you show up and be productive, but your internal world is dissolving in some way. And the sextile to Jupiter and Cancer in your 10th house could be a professional blessing in disguise that is kind of, acting like an emotional release, which basically suggests that if you stop trying to repress your sensitivity to maintain a perfect, professional veneer, or if you stop trying to be perfect when it comes to what you are ambitious about or your goals or how you approach leadership, maybe there's something about your career, your leadership, your ambitions that will actually expand when you do this. And your vulnerability is your leadership superpower at this time. If you're applying for the job, be vulnerable in the interview. If you're already working, be more vulnerable than you normally would. It could get you further than you think during this eclipse. And then on a personal level, stop trying to hack your own healing, because the South Node in Virgo in the 12th wants to turn spirituality into a spreadsheet. It wants a 10-step plan for enlightenment, but the integration here is to surrender that analysis. If you feel sad, just be sad without asking why or how long will this last. If you are anxious, stop trying to solve the anxiety and just let it wash through you. Just experiment with it. You're a Libra rising, you're fair. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Just try it for me. But also lean into the Pisces opposition. Let the daily routine slide a little so that your soul can breathe. Don't try to perfect everything at this time. But on an external level as well, try to create a sanctuary where no judgment is allowed. This might mean taking a break from therapy if it feels like too much work, or stepping back from the spiritual community if it feels, a little bit too rigid to you in some way. Maybe it's like making you feel rigid, even if the ideas are great. And Jupiter in the 10th house as well will suggest that the world will wait for you to do this unpacking. In fact, maybe the world will likely reward you more when you return with your cup full rather than running on empty fumes of performative wellness. And so the lesson here is that you really cannot analyze your way out of a feeling. You have to feel your way out of it. And so that is going to be your mantra for this time. Scorpio rising, the lunar eclipse hits your 11th house of friends, networks, future goals, community, your role in society. And with the South Node draining this area, the sensation could be one of social fatigue. Maybe you feel a sudden sharp intolerance for group dynamics, clique behavior, or the administrative labor required to maintain your friendships, or even just the state of society. Maybe you realize how messed up society is right now, and that is draining you, even if you're not directly connected to it. It could just be some TikToks that you've seen, which I don't blame you on that, honestly. But you've likely been maybe the planner or the fixer or the therapist of your social circle in some way, and you are suddenly realizing that this role is a heavy costume that you no longer wish to wear because it zaps you dry. And somatically, this can feel like a heaviness in the calves or the ankles, or simply a desire to delete every app on your phone. You are tired of maybe performing to really belong. And the opposition to the Pisces stellium in your 5th house of romance, creativity, and joy is kind of pulling you towards a more private, joyous, and messy experience of life. Focus on your joy and not, the big picture that comes within that. Maybe you want to paint without showing it to the group, or you want to love without getting the committee's approval, or you just want to experience some fun without having to connect it to a bigger cause. As well, the sextile to Jupiter Jupiter in your ninth house could offer a beautiful escape valve for you at this time. Travel, higher learning, or, connecting with people who come from a very different walk of life from you, or expanding your beliefs, your horizons, reading about something that, is kind of out of your comfort zone. This could be, very invigorating and very recharging for you. And so, in whatever way you have the opportunity to do this, go for it. On a personal level, resign from the role of the social manager in some way, because the South Node in Virgo asks you to stop curating your public persona, or stop curating your role in society, and stop analyzing, the state of, the bigger picture in your life. Maybe if a friendship, for example, requires that you constantly suppress your needs just to maintain the harmony, let it drift. You don't need to have a dramatic breakup. Just stop doing the work, stop initiating, stop planning if it does drain you. See who remains when you stop rowing the boat. Same thing with causes. Do not feel like you have to manage every piece of information. Let whatever is meant to come to you, come to you. On the external level, though, pivot your focus to the fifth house. Make art that is ugly. Go on dates that are unplanned. Play games where you don't keep score. Do what you got to do to tap into that joy. As well, Jupiter in the ninth house encourages you to seek wisdom, not consensus. So read philosophy, book a trip, talk to, God if you do believe in God. If you don't believe in God, talk to the universe. If you don't believe in the universe, just go for a walk in nature. Do whatever you feel connected to, but also try to do so without an agenda, because your belonging does not depend on your utility to the group or your contribution to society. Instead, it kind of comes, from trusting your skills and listening to your heart and using your mind towards causes that bring you joy. You need your head and heart to align, because that is how you are going to find the most joy and the most emotional regulation at this time. Sagittarius Rising, this is a high visibility eclipse for you. It's occurring in the 10th house of career, reputation, authority, leadership, public legacy. It's your goals. And the South Node here could be draining the life out of your professional mask. Maybe you feel an intense case of imposter syndrome, not because you're not capable, but because you're exhausted by the performance of competence that you're holding up, whether you're looking for a job, whether you have a job, when it comes to your ambitions. It could tie to a few things, if that makes sense. Maybe you're tired of being the boss or the expert or the one that has it all together. This could also do with your leadership in, non-career settings as well. That's a common misconception with the 10th house. Somatically as well, this could manifest as maybe back pain. It feels like you're carrying the weight of the world. Knee issues, there's like a fear of moving forward, or a grinding sense of dread on Sunday nights if you work that Monday to Friday 9 to 5, or a sense of dread, on before you go to work in whatever way, if that makes sense. And so the Virgo energy has likely made you hypercritical of your own work or your own contribution or your own, public perception almost. Maybe you obsess over every email and deliverable to avoid criticism. Maybe you're beating yourself up for not being, further in your career, if that is applicable. But the opposition to the Pisces stellium in your fourth house of home and family could be a siren song calling you back to the couch or to your roots and to the privacy of your own sanctuary. You crave to be unseen and you crave to just relax, if that makes sense. Let your nervous system calm down. And the sextile to Jupiter in Cancer in your eighth house is powerful medicine for you at this time. It suggests that if you let maybe your public image crack, if you don't try to be perfect in whatever ambitions you're going for, you could find a deep, transformative emotional support in your life. Or perhaps you could even land on some financial resources that really allow you to step off of that hamster wheel, and this could come out of nowhere almost. On a personal level, define success on your own terms, not the world's, because the South Node in Virgo in the 10th house is the endless ladder of I'm not good enough yet. Step off the ladder. Ask yourself, if I never achieved another great thing in life, would I still be worthy? The answer must be yes. And if the answer is not yes, try to lean into that Pisces fourth house. Go home, hide under a blanket, watch that movie for 7 hours straight, although I don't know how many movies are that long. Watch that TV series, I guess. Be a messy human being in the privacy of your own living room. On an external level as well, delegate or delete. So if you are in a leadership position, for example, stop doing everybody's job for them. If you are an employee, do exactly what is required and then go home. Do not offer extra unpaid labor to prove your worth. Jupiter in the 8th house really suggests that vulnerability is your new currency at this time. Admitting, I don't know, or I need help will build more trust right now than the perfect PowerPoint presentation ever really could. And so you are not your resume. That is kind of the reminder. You are the soul behind the suit. And remembering that at every step of the way is truly the key to your happiness at this time. Capricorn Rising, for you, this lunar eclipse in Virgo takes place in the 9th house of higher mind, belief systems, academia, and long distance horizons. It's anything that expands you out of your comfort zone. And because the South Node is involved, the sensation is one of maybe intellectual claustrophobia. You could feel trapped by your own expertise, your own moral code, or a specific worldview that you have meticulously constructed to make life feel more safe and predictable. Somatically, this could manifest as a tension in the hips or the thighs, or a restless, agitated energy that makes you want to run away from what doesn't serve you in life. But you can't kind of figure out, where to run because every destination feels flawed. Maybe you're tired of being the smart one, or the one with the certification, or the one who has the moral high ground in some way. And the opposition to the Pisces stellium in your 3rd house of local communication and your mindset, your immediate environment, suggests that the truth that you are seeking isn't found in a grand, perfect philosophy. It is found in the messy, intuitive, and perhaps illogical, conversations happening right in front of you. It's found in your mind. It's found right in front of you, essentially. And the sextile to Jupiter in Cancer in your 7th house is such a deep gift for you at this time because it suggests that maybe a partner, a romantic partner, a business partner, a friend, or just like how you connect to people in general, could be a platonic friendship. This is definitely holding the emotional key for you at this time. Because if you stop trying to teach others or to be the authority, maybe when you connect with others, there's something about their emotional wisdom that can expand your world in ways that your logic never could. So pay attention to your conversations at this time. They could teach you a lot. On a personal level, stop studying life and start living it. The South Node in Virgo in the 9th house wants a map for the territory. Burn the map. Admitting I don't know is the most spiritually advanced thing you can do at this time. Lean into the Pisces 3rd house. Write poetry instead of essays. Listen to music instead of podcasts. And trust your gut over your citations when it comes to, how you want to expand your life or your horizons. On an external level as well, if you are in a legal battle or an academic pursuit, which could be, some people, whether it's formal or informal, do not rely solely on technicalities because it could lead to more emotional drainage than you realize. The spirit of the law matters more than the letter of the law at this time. And then in relationships, let other people lead if this is possible. And if it's not possible, trust their input. Watch a YouTube video on something that you're trying to learn about. Let other people take you somewhere that you didn't plan because you never know what you will learn. And wisdom is not about having the perfect answer. It's about being okay with the mystery. And so that is kind of your mantra for this time so that you can embrace this eclipse to the best of your ability. Aquarius Rising, this is a deeply intense and psychological eclipse for you. It's occurring in your 8th house of shared resources, intimacy, debt, and the taboo. With the South Node here, the sensation is a visceral need to purge entanglement. You could feel a sudden repulsion towards anything that feels transactional in your relationships or in your life in general, whether that's financial debt, emotional scorekeeping, or the feeling that you owe someone or something your energy or that your energy is not yours. Somatically, this can live in the gut and the reproductive system. You could feel a heavy, dense knot of anxiety related to survival and trust at this time. You have likely been trying to micromanage your trauma or your debts or your intimate life in some way, treating your psyche almost like a project to be optimized. But the opposition to the Pisces stellium in your 2nd house of personal values and income is a flood of water washing over your carefully calculated complicated spreadsheets. You are being asked to trust that you will be provided for, even if you cannot control the source. And maybe that source is within you. Maybe you are the one who is more in control of your reality than you thought. And the sextile to Jupiter and Cancer in your sixth house is kind of your anchor. So simple daily acts of service and caring for your physical body, whether eating well, sleeping, nurturing rituals, even doing a daily stretch, which by the way, stretching is so underrated. This could stabilize you while the deep psychological waters continue to churn. And so, on a personal level, close the ledger because the South Node in Virgo in the eighth house is the accountant of the apocalypse. Stop counting who did what from whom. Stop calculating the return of investment for your emotions. If you give, give freely. If you can't give freely, don't give at all. Lean into the Pisces second house. Trust that your self-worth is infinite and fluid. It's not something that fluctuates based on your productivity or other people's approval or outside forces or how much money you have, whatever it may be. On an external level as well, do not sign complex contracts right now without a lawyer, but also on a more informal level. It doesn't have to be like a literal contract, by the way. Don't try to negotiate every single clause in your life to death. If a situation in your life feels heavy and restrictive, you have the power to walk away. Use the Jupiter sixth house energy if you are feeling, very heavy or out of control in your life. Scrub the floor, water the plants, pet the dog, ground your intense psychic energy into mundane nurturing tasks because this will do more magic than you realize. And so you cannot audit your way to intimacy or surrender. You have to accept the debt, whether energetic or literal to some degree, if you are eventually going to find power within it. And so that is your reminder at this time. Pisces Rising, this is a defining moment for you. This eclipse is occurring in the seventh house of committed partnerships, contracts, open enemies. It's how you relate to another, but also how you understand yourself through the mirror of connection. And so the South Node here could be draining the energy from your tendency to attract fixer-upper relationships or to be the subservient partner, whether platonic or romantic, who manages the details of the union while the other person gets to flow and do nothing. Maybe you feel like you're doing too much in your partnerships. And the sensation is kind of one of being done in some way. Maybe you're exhausted by the criticism from either a coworker, a partner, or friendships, maybe nagging either coming from you or directed at you, or the feeling that connection is a job or it's something that you are not worthy of. If you're not really somebody who's connecting with a lot of people, it could just be a feeling that you are not good enough, and you maybe nitpick either how you connect, or maybe you're being a little bit too harsh on how you perceive others as well. Somatically, this could manifest as a lower back pain or a feeling of being drained, as if your aura has holes in it. And the opposition to the Pisces stellium in your first house, it's the headline, because the sun, the north node, Venus, Mercury, and other planets are in your sign. This is your season, the season of you. You are waking up to your own power, your own chaotic brilliance, and your own needs. And the sextile to Jupiter in Cancer in the fifth house is going to be the cherry on top for you. It's kind of like the antidote if you do feel heavy when it comes to how you connect. It screams at maybe your joy, your romance, your creativity, what you create in general that's going to be the path forward. Focus on this. You are stepping out of the role of, what your use is when it comes to how you connect with other people, and you're stepping more into your role of the main character at this time. On a personal level, stop apologizing for your ocean, because the South Node in Virgo in the seventh house wants you to shrink yourself to fit into someone else's Tupperware. Don't do it. If you are messy, emotional, intuitive, if you don't trust something, if you don't trust a connection, if you don't trust yourself within connection, be that fully. The right person will know how to swim with you, not, suck the water out of you, if that makes sense. That was a weird metaphor, but you know what I'm trying to say. Lean into your first house North Node transit right now. Focus entirely on your own vitality, your own appearance, and your own path. It could feel selfish, but it's actually necessary for your alignment. On an external level, let the balls drop in your life. If you usually have to, help somebody, but you don't have the capacity to do it right now, don't do it. If you usually schedule the dates, if you are in a committed relationship, try to see if your other partner will do it. Withdraw your management energy from your connections and see what happens, because your relationships, your bonds, your friendships will either step up to meet you, or it will fall away fully, or maybe you will learn more about how you want to connect, even if you don't really have a connection right now. Either way, you are going to be free. And just remember, at this time, you were not born to be someone else's project manager. So put yourself in the exact box of your own design, and that is where happiness can be found at this time. If you have an Aries moon, your inner world is naturally fast, instinctual, and action-oriented, and you feel safest when you can process your feelings quickly and independently. But during this Virgo lunar eclipse, you could feel an intense urge to overanalyze or micromanage your emotions, and you could hit a wall like your usual keep moving forward coping mechanisms are suddenly draining your energy rather than helping. And you could face something that forces you to slow down and use patience and grace instead of logic, really exposing a visceral truth about your emotional vulnerability. And your emotions are basically telling you that gripping too tightly to how you react could create unnecessary blockages, not only just now, but in the long term as well. And so to prep for this energy, remind yourself that you don't have to process things perfectly. Drop the exhausting need to be on high alert. And if you trade harsh self-criticism for a little self-compassion at this time, you'll find a much healthier way to write out these feelings. If you have a Taurus moon, your inner world is naturally steady, methodical, and grounded, and you feel safest when you can process your feelings slowly and securely. And during this Virgo lunar eclipse, you could feel an intense urge to overanalyze or micromanage your emotions to keep things predictable. You could hit a wall feeling like the practical systems you rely on for stability are suddenly draining to your emotional reserves, and you could face something that really requires flexibility and grace instead of logic, really bringing up a truth about your emotional attachments. And your emotions are trying to tell you that gripping too tightly to your comfort zones could be creating unnecessary blockages. And so to prep for this energy, remind yourself that it is okay to step back from needing emotional perfection. Drop the exhausting need to be on high alert as well. And if you trade harsh self-criticism for self-compassion, you'll find a much more sustainable way to navigate those feelings. If you have a Gemini moon, your inner world is naturally clever, investigative, and curious, and you feel safest when you can process your feelings by talking them out or understanding them mentally at the very least. So during this Virgo lunar eclipse, you could feel an intense urge to overanalyze or micromanage your emotional responses, and you could hit a wall feeling like your usual trick of intellectualizing your feelings could be suddenly revealing its limits and draining your energy. And you could face something confusing that requires intuition and grace rather than logic, exposing kind of this visceral truth that totally defies your mind and the way it works. And your emotions are basically telling you that gripping too tightly to mental data is creating unnecessary blockages. So to prep for this energy, remind yourself that you don't have to figure it all out perfectly. Drop the dead weight of hypervigilance, and by letting compassion replace strict self-criticism, you'll find a healthier way to handle your feelings at this time. If you have a Cancer moon, your inner world is naturally intuitive, empathetic, and driven by passion. You feel safest when you can process your feelings through deep emotional connection or nurturing, no matter what it is that you're nurturing. So during this lunar eclipse, you could feel an intense urge to micromanage your emotional responses or put up rigid walls, and you could hit a point where the practical systems you rely on to protect your soft underbelly are suddenly draining your emotional reserves. You could face a relationship dynamic, for example, that requires grace instead of protective logic, revealing a truth about your inner boundaries, and your emotions are telling you that gripping too tightly to your emotional security could be creating unnecessary blockages. And so to prep for this energy, remind yourself that it is okay to let go of the pursuit of emotional perfection and drop the need to be on high alert. If you let compassion replace strict self-protection, you'll find a much more balanced way to navigate your heart at this time. If you have a Leo moon, your inner world is naturally expressive, creative, it radiates light, and you feel safest when you can process your feelings through outward validation and joyful expression. So during this Virgo lunar eclipse, you could feel an intense urge to overanalyze or micromanage how you come across emotionally. And you could hit a wall feeling like the systems you rely on to maintain your brightness are suddenly draining your emotional reserves. And you could face a humbling moment, for example, that requires real grace rather than performative logic, bringing up a visceral truth about your authentic core. And your emotions are trying to tell you that gripping too tightly to how you express yourself could be creating unnecessary blockages. And so, to prep for this energy, remind yourself that you don't have to be emotionally perfect or on all the time, and drop the need to be hyper vigilant on how you feel. And if you trade harsh self-criticism for genuine self-compassion, you'll find a much healthier way to write out the feelings at this time. If you have a Virgo moon, your inner world is naturally detailed, analytical, and it values practical, thoughtful application. And you feel safest when you can process your feelings by organizing them, maybe fixing things, and using logic. So during this eclipse, which is in your own sign, this is a major one for you. That ingrained urge to micromanage your responses is going to peak intensely. You could hit a wall feeling like the practical systems you rely on to compartmentalize your life are suddenly failing and maybe even draining your energy. You could face something unpredictable that requires surrender and grace rather than logistical control, exposing a truth that simply cannot be organized. And your emotions are basically telling you that gripping too tightly to the details of your psyche is creating blockages. So to prep for this energy, remind yourself that it is okay to step back from the pursuit of emotional perfection. Drop the dead weight of being on high alert, and if you let compassion replace very strict self-criticism, you'll find a much more sustainable way to navigate your feelings at this time. If you have a Libra moon, your inner world is naturally balanced, fair. It's focused on seeing things through the lens of, an outside perspective. And you feel safest when you can process your feelings through harmony, relationships, or mediation, whatever resonates. And during this Virgo lunar eclipse, you could feel an intense urge to overanalyze or micromanage your emotional responses just to keep the peace. And you could hit a wall feeling like the practical systems you rely on to maintain that balance are suddenly revealing their limits and draining your energy. You could face an imbalanced situation that requires messy grace rather than polite logic, bringing up a new truth about your people-pleasing habits or maybe your habit of putting yourself aside at the very least, or not really considering yourself. And your emotions are trying to tell you that gripping too tightly to the idea of harmony could be creating unnecessary blockages. So to prep for this energy, remind yourself that it's okay if things are not emotionally perfect, and drop the need to be hyper vigilant, because if you trade self-criticism for self-compassion, you'll find a much healthier way to navigate your feelings at this time. If you have a Scorpio moon, your inner feelings are naturally deep, investigative, and powerful, and you feel safest when you can process your feelings through intense emotional honesty, observation, and maintaining control. So during this Virgo lunar eclipse, you could feel an intense urge to overanalyze or micromanage your vulnerabilities, and you could hit a wall feeling like the practical systems you rely on to guard your psychological depths are suddenly draining your emotional reserves. You could face a vulnerable moment that requires forgiveness and grace rather than defensive logic, revealing a truth about your emotional need for control that you didn't really acknowledge before. And your emotions are basically telling you that gripping too tightly to your emotional power is creating unnecessary blockages. So to prep for this energy, remind yourself that it is okay to step back from needing to handle things perfectly. And you can drop the dead weight of hypervigilance. And by allowing compassion to replace strict self-criticism, you'll find a much healthier way to navigate your depths at this time. If you have a Sagittarius moon, your inner world is naturally optimistic, expansive, and eager for new experiences. And you feel safest when you can process your feelings through finding meaning, maybe philosophical context, or at least being able to express yourself freely. And so during this Virgo lunar eclipse, you could feel an intense urge to overanalyze or micromanage your emotional response, which is a little bit out of character for you. And you could hit a wall, feeling like the practical systems that you rely on to justify your overarching beliefs or, your emotional landscape are suddenly draining your emotional reserves. You could face something confusing that requires spiritual grace rather than, this very dogmatic logic, exposing a truth that defies your established worldview. And your emotions are trying to tell you that gripping too tightly to the details of your philosophies could be creating blockages. So to prep for this energy, remind yourself that you don't have to have it perfectly figured out to, experience the joy and optimism that your heart also wants. And so drop the need to be on high alert. And if you let compassion replace strict self-criticism, you will find a much healthier way to write out your feelings at this time. If you have a Capricorn moon, your inner world is naturally practical, focused on security. It's results-oriented and often stoic. And you feel safest when you can process your feelings through composure, structure, and taking emotional responsibility. So during this Virgo lunar eclipse, you could feel an intense urge to overanalyze or micromanage your internal world. And you could hit a wall of sorts, really feeling like the practical systems you rely on to maintain your stoicism or to keep things together are suddenly revealing their limits and draining your energy. You could face a soft, even messy situation that requires emotional grace rather than cold logic, bringing up a truth about the hidden burdens that you're carrying. And your emotions are basically telling you that gripping too tightly onto your composure could be creating blockages. And so to prep for this energy, remind yourself that it is okay to step back from the pursuit of emotional perfection and drop the dead weight of having to hold it all together. But because by allowing compassion to replace strict self-criticism, you'll find a much more sustainable way to navigate your feelings at this time. If you have an Aquarius moon, your inner world naturally walks to the beat of its own drum. It's innovative, it's observant, and it's prone to sudden insights. And you feel safest when you can process your feelings through objectivity, or at least giving yourself space to process things, even if you feel very intensely. And so during this Virgo lunar eclipse, you could feel an intense urge to overanalyze or micromanage your emotional responses. And you could also hit a wall feeling like the practical systems you rely on to remain, observant and really in control of your emotions are suddenly draining to your emotional reserves. You could face a highly personal situation that requires warm grace rather than logic, exposing a truth that you simply cannot analyze away. It's a kind of a feeling that's unexplainable for you, especially as an Aquarius moon. And your emotions are trying to tell you that gripping too tightly to your detachment or gripping too tightly to an ideal that maybe, doesn't acknowledge your feelings is what is creating blockages for you. And so to prep for this energy, remind yourself that it is okay to step back from the need to perfectly understand everything about how you feel. And drop the weight of hypervigilance as well, because if you trade harsh self-criticism for a little bit of self-compassion, you'll find a much healthier way to write out these feelings at this time. And finally, if you have a Pisces moon, your inner world acts like an energetic and creative sponge. You are naturally empathetic, open, and very compassionate. You feel safest when you can process your feelings through spiritual flow and boundless sensitivity. So during this Virgo lunar eclipse, which does oppose your moon by sign at least, you could feel an intense urge to overanalyze or rigidly micromanage your emotional responses. And you could hit a wall feeling like the practical systems you've tried to build to process, your unseen or absorbent emotions are suddenly failing and draining your energy. But you also could face a grounding moment that requires focused grace rather than drifting logic, revealing a truth about maybe your lack of emotional boundaries in some area of your life. And your emotions are basically telling you that gripping too tightly to how you process things could be creating unnecessary blockages. And so, to prep for this energy, remind yourself that you don't have to navigate your inner world perfectly, but also you can drop the dead weight of being on high alert if you are hyper vigilant at this time. And by letting compassion replace self criticism at this time, you'll find a much more balanced way to handle your feelings and to close the floodgates whenever you feel intensely. If your natal moon is in the first house, your sense of safety is tied to your sense of self, maybe your appearance or your independence. And you feel the most secure when you have absolute clarity over who you are and how you want to present to the world. I have this placement too. It can be intense, as you know. And so during this Virgo lunar eclipse, you could feel an intense urge to overanalyze or micromanage your personal trajectory. And you could hit a wall, kind of feeling like the practical systems you rely on to maintain your self-image or self-regulation are suddenly draining your emotional reserves. And so you could face a dynamic that requires grace rather than defensiveness, revealing this truth about how others actually perceive you. And your emotions are basically telling you that gripping too tightly to the details of how you're being perceived or how you're feeling could create blockages. And so to prep for this energy, remind yourself that it is okay to step back from needing to be perfect, because if you allow yourself to feel your feelings without hyper analyzing them, you can navigate your emotions a lot more healthily at this time. If your natal moon is in the second house, your sense of safety is tied to your possessions, your self-esteem, and your core values. And you feel the most secure when you have absolute clarity over your material security or your sense of self-worth. So during this Virgo eclipse, you could feel an intense urge to overanalyze or micromanage your resources, your finances, or your worth. But you also could hit this wall feeling like the practical systems you rely on to maintain material order are kind of revealing their limits and draining your energy. Maybe you face a financial shift or a shift in self-worth that requires grace rather than panic, exposing a visceral spiritual truth about what true abundance really means for you. And your emotions are trying to tell you that gripping too tightly to the details of your security and your worth could be creating unnecessary blockages. And so to prep for this energy, remind yourself that you don't have to have it all perfectly figured out. And if you trade harsh self-criticism for compassion regarding your material reality, if you allow yourself to hype yourself up even when you don't feel like it, you'll find a much more sustainable way to navigate your feelings that doesn't drain you. If your natal moon is in the third house, your sense of safety is tied to communication, your mindset, and your local environment. And you feel the most secure when you have absolute clarity over your thoughts and your daily interactions. So during this Virgo lunar eclipse, you could feel an intense urge to overanalyze or micromanage your mental patterns or your conversations. And you could feel like the practical systems you rely on to keep your mind orderly are suddenly draining your emotional reserves in some way. And you could also face a confusing discussion that requires grace rather than logic, which could bring up a truth that totally defies your usual rationale in some way. And your emotions are basically telling you that gripping too tightly onto mental data is creating blockages that could be stifling your emotions. And so to prep for this energy, remind yourself it's okay that you don't communicate perfectly right now, and drop the exhausting need to be on high alert. And by letting compassion replace the self-criticism within your mind, you'll find a much healthier way to handle your emotions at this time. If your natal moon is in the fourth house, your sense of safety is tied to your home, your roots, or at the very least, your innermost private self. And you feel the most secure when you have absolute clarity over your private life or your familial foundations, or if you know you need your nervous system to feel safe and secure. If you want to feel safe and secure, it is a big need for you. And so during this Virgo lunar eclipse, you could feel an intense urge to overanalyze or micromanage your domestic environment or your family dynamics or who you are at the core. Or you could hit a wall, feeling like the practical systems you rely on to maintain peace at home or within yourself are kind of revealing their limits. And you could face a home matter or an inner self matter or a family matter that requires grace rather than strict rules, which could expose a spiritual truth about maybe your ancestral ties and who you want to be at the core and what safety actually means to you. And your emotions are trying to tell you that gripping too tightly to the details of your emotional roots could be creating unnecessary blockages. And so, to prep for this energy, remind yourself that it's okay to take a step back from needing your foundation to be perfect. You don't have to have everything together to feel safe. And drop the dead weight of hypervigilance, because if you trade the harsh criticism for compassion when it comes to your innermost self in your situation, you'll find a much more balanced way to navigate your feelings at this time. Moon in the fifth house, your sense of safety is tied to creativity, pleasure, self-expression, romance, and children. And in other words, you kind of feel the most secure when you have absolute clarity over your joy and how to channel your heart, and you're able to live that freely. So during this Virgo lunar eclipse, you could feel an intense urge to overanalyze or micromanage your creative outputs or your romantic life or what joy means to you. You could also hit a wall, feeling like the systems that you rely on to maintain fun or passion in your life are suddenly draining to you. Maybe you face a romantic shift that requires grace rather than control, or maybe you face, a shift in how often you can engage in things that bring you joy, which does reveal a truth about what brings you authentic happiness. And your emotions are basically telling you that gripping too tightly to the details of your pleasure could be creating blockages. So to prep for this energy, remind yourself that joy does not have to be perfectly managed. Drop the need to be on high alert when it comes to finding what joy means to you. And by allowing compassion to replace criticism within your creative life and how you create, you'll find a much healthier way to write out these emotions at this time. If your natal moon is in the sixth house, your fundamental sense of safety is tied to your health or your routine or your day-to-day life. You have to have things together because you feel the most secure when you have clarity over your habits or your physical functioning. So during this Virgo lunar eclipse, you could feel an intense urge to overanalyze or micromanage your wellness regimens or your daily schedule. And you could hit a wall of sorts, feeling like the practical systems you rely on to maintain optimum efficiency are suddenly revealing their limits and draining your energy. You could face a physical boundary that requires bodily grace rather than just pushing through, bringing up a visceral truth about your real need for rest. And your emotions are trying to tell you that gripping too tightly to the details of your daily output could be creating unnecessary blockages that are making you feel stifled. So to prep for this energy, remind yourself that it is okay to step back from the pursuit of daily perfection. Drop the dead weight of hypervigilance. And if you trade harsh self-criticism for compassion towards your body and how you exert yourself, you'll find a much more sustainable way to navigate your feelings at this time. If your natal moon is in the seventh house, your fundamental sense of safety is tied to partnerships, how you connect, and seeing yourself in the mirror of another person. And you feel the most secure when you have clarity over your interpersonal commitments. And during this Virgo lunar eclipse, you could feel an intense urge to overanalyze or micromanage your relationships and your partner's behaviors. Or at the very least, you could want to micromanage how you connect in some way, even if you're single. And you could hit a wall feeling like the practical systems you rely on to maintain relational balance are suddenly draining you for some reason. And you could face a dynamic with another person that really requires grace rather than a tit-for-tat logic, really exposing a truth about your relationship boundaries. Or you could face a situation where you realize maybe where you have been, too harsh on your connections, and that really reflects back onto you. And your emotions are basically telling you that gripping too tightly to the details of how you connect could be creating blockages. So to prep for this energy, remind yourself that relationships don't have to be managed perfectly. You can drop the need to be on high alert, because by letting compassion replace strict criticism within how you relate to other people, you'll find a much healthier way to handle your emotions at this time. If your natal moon is in the 8th house, your sense of safety is tied to transformation, the deep taboo parts of life, or shared resources. So you feel the most secure when you have absolute clarity over your psychological bonds and mutual exchanges. And during this Virgo lunar eclipse, you could feel an urge to overanalyze or micromanage your vulnerabilities or your financial entanglements, whatever resonates with you with this house. And you could hit a wall really feeling like the systems that you rely on to maintain energetic control are revealing their limits, which could drain your energy. You might face a deeply psychological matter that requires grace rather than defense, bringing up a visceral truth about letting go of old grief. And your emotions are trying to tell you that gripping too tightly to the details of your transformations are creating unnecessary blockages. And so, to prep for this energy, remind yourself that it is okay to step back from needing to process things perfectly. If you are able to trade self-criticism for compassion within your psychological reality, you'll find a much more balanced way to navigate your feelings at this time. If your natal moon is in the 9th house, your fundamental sense of safety is tied to you having the freedom that you want to feel whatever you want to feel. It's tied to higher learning, your sense of expansion, travel, and you feel the most secure when you have absolute clarity over your belief systems or your life philosophy, or you have control over your freedom, like I said. And so during this lunar eclipse, you could feel an intense urge to overanalyze or micromanage your overarching goals and your spiritual journey. And you could hit a wall feeling like the systems that you rely on to maintain your worldview are suddenly draining to your emotional reserves. And you could face a perspective shift that requires open-minded grace rather than logic, which could expose a truth that defies your known doctrines. And your emotions are basically telling you that gripping too tightly to the details of what you believe or what your goals are could be creating blockages. And so, to prep for this energy, remind yourself that you do not need to have life entirely figured out perfectly. And really, by allowing compassion to replace strict criticism within your philosophical reality or what you've achieved in life, you'll find a much healthier way to navigate your emotions at this time. If your natal moon is in the 10th house, your sense of safety could be tied to your ambitions, your public image, your role in the public eye, your leadership, your career, and you feel the most secure when you have clarity over your professional trajectory or your reputation or your skills, the skills you want to put out in the world. So during this Virgo lunar eclipse, you could feel an urge to overanalyze or micromanage your public output or your career path in some way. And you could also hit a wall feeling like the systems you rely on to maintain authority, even if it's not with career, just authority in general, are suddenly revealing their limits, and it could be draining to your energy. You could face a professional pivot that requires grace rather than ambition that's, stubborn and won't move, bringing up a truth about what constitutes as real success for you. And your emotions are trying to tell you that gripping too tightly to the details of your ambitions are creating unnecessary blockages. And so, to prep for this energy, remind yourself that it is okay to step back from the pursuit of professional perfection. And if you trade harsh self-criticism for compassion when it comes to your goals or how you want to lead or present in the world, you'll find a much more sustainable way to navigate your feelings at this time. If your natal moon is in the 11th house, your fundamental sense of safety is tied to your community, your goals, your friends, or your place in society. And you feel the most secure when you have clarity over your social networks or your long-term visions. And during this lunar eclipse, you could feel an intense urge to overanalyze or micromanage your group involvements or your future plans in some way. And you could hit a wall feeling like the practical systems you rely on to maintain social order are suddenly draining your emotional reserves in some way. You could face a dynamic within your community, for example, whether online or in person, that requires grace rather than intellectual debate, exposing a truth about what collective belonging really means for you. And your emotions are basically telling you that gripping too tightly to the details of your future goals could be creating unnecessary blockages. So, to prep for this energy, remind yourself that your social life does not need to be perfectly managed. Your dreams do not need to all be figured out. And by letting compassion replace strict criticism within your goals or where you are in society or where you are in life or what step you're on when it comes to your dreams, you'll find a much healthier way to handle your emotions at this time. If your natal moon is in the 12th house, your sense of safety is tied to the subconscious, the unseen realms, maybe your spirituality, and you feel the most secure when you have absolute clarity over your inner healing and your mental solitude. And so during this Virgo lunar eclipse, you could feel an intense urge to overanalyze or micromanage your spiritual practice or your subconscious processing. You could be trying to force yourself to process because you want to get something out, but you don't know how to. And you could hit a wall feeling like the practical systems you rely on to manage hidden anxieties are revealing their limits and draining your energy. And you could receive, for example, an intuitive download that requires surrender and grace rather than overanalysis, bringing up a truth about your universal connectedness. And your emotions are trying to tell you that gripping too tightly to the details of, how you would connect to the unseen forces in life could be creating blockages. And so to prep for this transit, remind yourself that it is okay to step back from the pursuit of spiritual perfection. And if you trade harsh self-criticism for compassion within your spiritual reality, and you don't try to force your brain to, bypass the things that it is trying to process, you'll find a much more balanced way to navigate your feelings at this time. With natal Mercury in Aries, your mental processing is very direct, it's immediate, it's instinctual, and you do not hold your thoughts in a queue. You kind of process them in real time, and your mind learns through the act of doing rather than simulating. And you kind of cut through noise to find a singular point of action. And so, this Virgo eclipse will function as a complex, detailed audit that conflicts with your need for mental speed. And you may feel a high degree of cognitive friction because the eclipse is forcing you to slow down and review the fine print of decisions that you may have made on impulse. And the Virgo energy really demands that you retrace your steps to find errors, which is the exact opposite of your forward momentum style. And you could feel mentally caged by the requirement to explain your logic or justify your instincts with data. And so you can manage this by accepting that reviewing is not the same as stopping. So when your mind wants to jump to the conclusion, force yourself to verbally articulate the steps that you need to get there. And so your instincts are sharp, but this energy really requires you to sharpen the logic behind them so that they can actually land effectively. Mercury in Taurus, your mental processing is very deliberate, methodical, it's very sensory, and you build thoughts like masonry. It's one brick at a time, testing the stability of the concept before adding the next. And once you have formed a conclusion, it is solid and difficult to dismantle, and you value mental durability over mental speed. And so this Virgo eclipse kind of acts as a destabilizing force to your carefully constructed mental frameworks. And because you process information through a filter of sustainability, maybe the erratic or critical nature of this eclipse could feel a little bit threatening to your peace of mind. And you might find that a method, a routine, or opinion that you have held onto for stability is no longer supported. And the nuance here is the discomfort of having to unlearn a habit that you may have spent a long time perfecting. And this eclipse asks you to be flexible in a way that feels unnatural to your steady rhythm. And so you can support your mind at this time by focusing on the why of the change of maybe your mental processes or the information rather than the discomfort of the shift itself, and allow yourself to take the new information in slowly. You do not need to overhaul your entire mindset overnight. And so mental strength during this transit is not going to be about holding your ground, but it's about testing the soil to see if it can still support you. Mercury in Gemini, your mental processing is very dualistic, rapid, and connective, and you are kind of the pollinator of the zodiac. You're capable of holding multiple, often contradictory streams of information simultaneously, and you process by sampling, comparing, and discussing, and your mind is a web of infinite open tabs in your mind almost. And this eclipse is happening in a fellow mercurial sign, but where you're kind of like, expansion and variety. Virgo is contraction, it's selective. And so you could feel a sudden jarring need to close the tabs in your brain. And this eclipse energy kind of forces your scattering mind to focus on a single, possibly uncomfortable point of failure. And you might feel overwhelmed not by the amount of information, but by the demand to do something practical with it, no matter what information it is. And this nervous system buzz in your mind could be intense, really manifesting as a feeling that you have consumed too much data and can no longer digest it. And so you can handle this energy by treating your mind like a crowded room that needs to be cleared. Stop ingesting new podcasts, books, or opinions just for a few days and force your brain to output, whether writing or speaking or cleaning, rather than, taking on too much input. So intelligence for you right now is really going to be defined by what you choose to ignore, not by how much you are able to retain. And so this is an important thing for you to remember at this time. Mercury in Cancer, your mental processing is retentive, protective, and deeply integrated with your emotional memory. And you do not separate the fact from the feeling of that fact because you are aware that they're kind of one entity. And so your mind may circle around subjects, approaching them sideways or intuitively rather than in a straight, dry line, unless you have a moon in a very logical sign. And then you may be a little bit different than the stereotype. But no matter who you are, you do learn through immersion. And so the clinical dissecting nature of the Virgo eclipse can feel a little bit abrasive to your softer, more fluid way of thinking. And you might feel that your intuition could be invalidated by cold, hard facts at this time, or you could find yourself hyper analyzing the emotional safety of your environment in some way. And so the danger here is using the sharp Virgo energy to surgically dismantle your own feelings, criticizing yourself for being irrational, and you might be stuck in a loop of remembering past details and reevaluating them with a harsh critical eye. And so you can soothe this friction if you do experience it by validating your intuition as a form of data. Do not try to force your thoughts into a spreadsheet. Write down your feelings or your intuitive hits to get them out of your body, but do not judge them if maybe they don't align perfectly with reality. And so your mind's ability to feel the nuance is a strength, but do not let the eclipse convince you that your empathy or your intuitive, mind is a calculation error, because everything can coexist at the same time. Mercury in Leo, your mental processing is very narrative. It can be creative, but it's centralized around identity. And so you think in stories or in arcs. And when you process information, you're often looking for the hero or the meaning within the data. And your communication style is designed to radiate outward and impact the audience. You kind of say what you feel and you say what you think, and you think very forward, if that makes sense. And so this Virgo eclipse brings a fluorescent administrative light into that creative studio of your mind. And so you could feel that your grand ideas are being picked apart for minor technical flaws, which could feel like a rejection of your entire vision. And so the nuance here is a clash between style and substance. You could find yourself frustrated by the mundane details of life, or the details may be required to bring your visions to life. And so this eclipse really challenges you to separate your ego from your intellect. Just because an idea needs editing doesn't mean you're a failure. If anything, it takes so much, heart and so much intelligence to embrace a new idea. And you can use this energy constructively by acting as the editor of your own life movie. Look at the script and cut the scenes that are dragging, and accept that the boring details are actually the support structure for whatever it is that you're trying to create. And so true creativity or true creative authority at this time really comes from mastering the technical skills that allows your brilliance to actually shine through. So remind yourself of this at this time. Mercury in Virgo, your mental processing is very analytical, granular, and diagnostic, and you naturally break complex wholes into their component parts to understand how they work. And you filter information through the lens of utility and improvement. You are kind of the editor and the debugger of the zodiac. And so this transit could be a system overload for you, because this eclipse is happening on your frequency. It's happening conjunct my natal Mercury as well. Your natural mechanic of spotting the flaw is going to to be dialed up to a level that could be unsustainable if you don't filter it. And you might find yourself unable to turn off the critical stream of consciousness, seeing every error, every inefficiency, and every potential disaster all simultaneously. And so the release of the South Node is kind of trying to strip away the anxiety that comes with this hyper awareness. You are likely processing so much detail that you are experiencing decision fatigue. And so you can survive this energy by consciously lowering your resolution. Stop looking at the pixels and try to look at the blurry whole. And when your mind says fix it, practice responding with maybe not today or not now. I can do it later when I'm a little bit more chill. And so your analytical mind is a tool. It's not a torture device, and you are allowed to put the tool down and let things remain broken for a while. That is what you have to remember at this time. Mercury in Libra, your mental processing is very comparative, it's dialectic, it's relational, and you think by weighing two opposing concepts against each other to find the center. And you often process your own thoughts best when bouncing them off of another source, maybe another person. You also do value mental harmony and consensus. And so the Virgo eclipse could introduce a jagged, asymmetrical variable into your balancing act. You may feel a specific type of analysis paralysis where the desire for a fair outcome clashes with the messy, illogical reality of a situation in your life. And so the Virgo energy is critical and decisive, which can feel harsh to your diplomatic mind. You could find yourself obsessively replaying conversations, maybe analyzing the syntax and the tone, worrying that you haven't been perfectly understood. And this eclipse really demands a decision based on practical necessity, not harmony or what you feel is balance. And so you can navigate this transit by accepting that sometimes the correct choice is not the nice choice and it's not the one that may be intuitive to you. So stop outsourcing your thinking to others or outside sources in hopes of finding consensus, and trust your own internal logic. If this isn't something you do, some Libra Mercuries already know how to do this, but it will feel sharp at this time no matter what. So be mindful of that. And so mental peace is not found in the absence of conflict at this time, but in the ability to make a choice and stand by it without endless reconsideration. Mercury in Scorpio, your mental processing is very penetrative, investigative, and subtractive. You do not skim the surface, you drill down. I love you guys so much. You're so intelligent. And you process information by looking for the subtext, the motivation, and what is not being said. You are naturally very skeptical and psychologically astute with this placement as well. And so the Virgo eclipse can send your investigative mind into a tailspin of micromanagement. And while you usually look for the deep psychological truths or the deep, underlying truths, the Virgo energy might have you fixating on maybe surface level evidence to prove a deeper suspicion. You could find yourself obsessively researching a symptom, a person, or a discrepancy in some area of your life. And the nuance here is the danger of confusing anxiety with intuition. You might be using your powerful mind to dissect a situation that is actually quite simple just because you don't trust that simplicity. And so you can channel this energy by giving your mind a complex problem to solve that is not personal. Use your focus for research or deep learning on something that has no stakes so that you can learn how to identify what your intuition is versus what anxiety is, because it's going to differ for everybody how you identify this, but it is important that you learn how to do this. And if you catch yourself playing detective with maybe, something more personal, try to step back at least for a little bit, because depth is your superpower, but sometimes the surface is all there is. Do not dig a hole just because you have a shovel, and that is an important reminder for you at this time. Mercury in Sagittarius, your mental processing is very expansive, associative, and theoretical. You think in broad strokes, really connecting distant concepts to form a worldview. And you learn through exploration and synthesis rather than kind of this, memorization that doesn't really, serve you. And you value the spirit of the law over the letter of the law. And this Virgo eclipse for you will act as a tether. It pulls your balloon back to the ground. So you could feel an intense frustration with maybe details, logistics, and facts that seem to contradict your optimism or contradict your plans. And the mechanic here is a clash between scope and precision. You want to talk about maybe the philosophy or the meaning of what it is that you're going after, but this eclipse wants you to talk about the logistics, the gas mileage. And so you could feel that your intellectual freedom is being cramped by the need for accuracy and proof at this time. But the South Node is really asking you to release the generalization that glosses over important truths. And so you can manage this energy by acknowledging that details are the vehicle for your wisdom. Don't dismiss the boring facts. Instead, you have to integrate them. Spend 10 minutes on the logistics so that you can spend the rest of the day on, the big picture or the meaning of whatever it is that you're trying to craft. And so a big vision really requires a sturdy foundation. Remember that. Let this eclipse show you where the cracks are so that you can actually build something that lasts. And that is what you can take away from this transit. Mercury in Capricorn, your mental processing is very structural, strategic, and authoritative, and you think in hierarchies and timelines. You also filter information through a lens of viability and outcome, and you are not interested in knowledge for knowledge's sake, but for what you can build and secure with this knowledge. And so the Virgo eclipse will resonate with your earth sign nature, but can push your managerial mind into overdrive, and you could find yourself conducting a ruthless performance review of your own life at this time. The nuance here is that your mind may become overly pessimistic, seeing only the liabilities and none of the assets of, whatever it is you're focusing on at this time. You could also be fixated on the efficiency of your path, maybe judging yourself for wasted time or resources. And this eclipse really asks you to release the rigid mental timeline that you have imposed on your success. And so you can support yourself by recognizing that rest is a functional part of your strategy, not a deviation from it, or maybe that you can take a step back from how meticulous you are when you're laying your bricks. And when your mind starts calculating the return of investment of your day, consciously remind yourself that you are human. You're not a corporation, you're not a robot, because your strategic mind is brilliant, but it needs to be flexible enough at this time to account for human error, including your own. And so open your mind to that and know that whatever happens in your life, you can now lay every brick down without, hyper focusing on what doesn't matter. Mercury in Aquarius, your mental processing is systematic, innovative, could be a little bit detached, and so you think in networks, patterns, and future probabilities. You often view situations from a bird's eye view, removing your own ego to see the grid, and you process by disrupting the established norm to find a better way of doing something. And so this Virgo eclipse could feel incredibly heavy or pedestrian to your high frequency mind. You could feel frustrated that your abstract concepts are getting bogged down, maybe in execution errors. And the mechanic here is a disconnect between the ideal system in your head and the glitchy reality of daily life. You could find yourself annoyed by maybe the inefficiencies in your life or the maintenance required to keep things running, especially mentally, but also maybe with the data and the ideas going on in your life as well. And this eclipse is forcing you to debug the code of your daily existence, which could feel tedious, but it is absolutely necessary. And so you can handle this energy by applying your genius to the mundane. Gamify your chores or your work or automate your routine, or maybe don't hyper focus on your thoughts so much and let your intuitive Aquarian mind do all the talking. Use your ability to see systems to make the boring stuff in your life run smoother rather than just ignoring it. And so innovation is really useless if it cannot be applied, and so use this time to build the interface that connects your future vision to the present reality, and that is how you can make the most of this transit. Mercury in Pisces, your mental processing is very impressionistic. It could be non-linear, but it's very visual. You think in images, feelings, and symbols rather than words. Your mind is very porous. It absorbs the atmosphere around you, and you process by drifting through the data and letting the truth emerge rather than hunting for it. It's like you're a passive filter. I've met a lot of Mercury in Pisces who are very intelligent. Don't let it any other astrologers convince you that this is not the case. And so this eclipse opposes your natural mental state. Virgo energy is very binary. It's either correct or incorrect, while your mind is more fluid. And so you could feel a significant amount of brain fog or confusion as the eclipse tries to force you into linear categorization. But the nuance here is the feeling of being overwhelmed by the sharpness of the world. And so you could struggle to articulate your thoughts because they don't fit into the rigid boxes that the eclipse is presenting. But there is a Pisces stellium happening in your sign. And so you have all of the resources to really hone in on your thinking patterns. Do not try to force yourself to be someone you're not. That is kind of the main message for you. And the danger, though, could be checking out completely or disassociating to avoid the pressure at this time. And so you can navigate this transit as well by translating the data in your own way. Use metaphors or art or whatever works for you, however you communicate. Use these to understand the facts. And do not force yourself to think in straight lines. Instead, focus on one small tangible truth at a time to anchor yourself. And so your intuition and your ability to process information is valid, and do not let the demands of the transit erase your ability to dream, but do let the logic keep you safe. And so however you filter information, trust your intelligence at this time, and that can help you get so far. Mercury in the first house, you process information through the filter of self reference. So, when an idea or situation presents itself, your immediate automatic calculation is, what does this say about me? Or does this align with who I am? And so, you could also just very filter information through your body almost. It's like your body knows what's true and what's not. And you don't just learn facts, you may embody them. Your mind could be very busy, and your mind is definitely the captain of your ship, and you likely view your intellect as a primary defining feature of your personality. And because your lens is so focused on the eye, this critical Virgo eclipse can feel like a personal performance review. You could perceive a general error in a plan as a specific flaw in your character. You could also find yourself over editing your speech, your appearance, or your mannerisms, really trying to optimize your personality to avoid criticism. And the danger here is merging your self worth with your data points. And so you can break the loop by realizing that maybe a mistake is simply something you did. It's not something you are, it's not a reflection of who you are. And so treat your personality like a garden that grows, not a sculpture that must be chiseled to perfection. And so your identity is not a thesis statement that needs to be defended. Release the need to be correct in order to be valid. And this is the number one advice that I can give you during this transit. Mercury in the second house, you process information through the filter of worth and substance. You are the appraiser of the zodiac. So when you encounter a new idea, a conversation, or a plan, you instantly measure its weight. Is this worth my time? How much is this worth? Is this a valuable use of my resources? Is this practical? I have this placement as well. And every time I look at something, it's like I'm kind of like weighing things, if that makes sense. And you prefer thoughts that are very tangible, solid, and have a clear return of investment, whether it's with literal money, energy, emotional bandwidth, you name it. And so the Virgo eclipse shakes up your appraisal system, and you could feel a heightened anxiety that you are spending your mental energy on things that are not yielding a result. You could find yourself obsessively calculating the utility of your skills or your assets, feeling like you need to prove your worth through tangible output. And the mental stress comes from a perceived lack of security or resource in your life. And so you can manage this energy by reminding yourself that rest and unproductive thinking also have value. Reevaluate your definition of wealth to include mental peace, not just productivity or, constantly weighing things, because not everything needs to be an asset. You have to release the mental spreadsheet in your mind and really allow yourself to think freely without calculating the cost. And that is how you can get through this eclipse to the best of your ability. Mercury in the third house, you process information through the filter of pattern recognition and flux. You are the operator at the switchboard, and so your mind works by scanning the immediate environment for data points and seeing how they link together. You process reality by engaging with it directly through conversation, observation, and curiosity. And your lens is kind of, how does X relate to Y, and who needs to know about it, and what do I do with this? You're constantly managing the information around you and you take it from your immediate environment, and your mind could be very busy. And because your lens is very wide angled and detail oriented, this eclipse can feel like static interference. You might find yourself hyperfixating on the glitches of your daily environment, maybe a misunderstood text, a traffic jam, a chaotic schedule. And so the Virgo energy turns your pattern recognition into pattern policing, where you feel responsible for sorting every piece of data that comes your way. And so you can survive this transit by putting your phone or your mind on do not disturb. You're not the internet, you're not the data, you don't constantly need to scan everything, and you don't need to process every packet of data. And so intentionally disconnect from noise wherever possible to reset your own frequency, because clarity will come from this filtering, not consuming. So releasing the need to be the hub that connects everything is really the way that you can make the most out of this transit. Mercury in the fourth house, you process information through the filter of security and instinct, and your mind doesn't just think, it gut checks. When you process data, you are running it against your internal database of memory, emotional safety, kind of like what it makes you feel on the inside. And your lenses, does this feel safe? Does this threaten my roots? Does this make sense with my history? And your intellect could be very deeply private and protective and focused on the internal world or the internal motivations of whatever's happening. And so this Virgo eclipse could bring a cold analytical light into your private mind. You could find yourself trying to logic your way out of an old emotional pattern or family dynamic. And you really could find yourself, ruminating on the past in some way, even if it's not related to, your home or anything like that, really trying to organize your history into neat labeled boxes, which could create friction because memory could be inherently messy. Or maybe there's something about your mindset that, had some past conditioning that you're now learning needs to be unpacked. And so the struggle is applying logic to something that may be, based a little bit more internally. And so you can handle this by focusing on your safety, your sense of roots, your intuition as a proxy for your mind. Really acknowledge your feelings or your thought processes without needing to dissect them or justify them to anybody, because you cannot organize your past, you cannot organize your internal self into neat little boxes. Release the need to retroactively fix the past so that you can now feel more safe in the present. Mercury in the fifth house, you process information through the filter of creation and ego. Your mind is kind of like a stage, because when you learn or think, you are looking for the narrative, the drama, the spark. Your lens is this interesting? Can I play with this? Does this allow me to shine? Can I create with this? Your mind, is geared towards what you can create with any data or, any facts. And you process reality by adding your own unique spin to it. You are not a reporter. You're kind of a storyteller who craves engagement and creativity, not even necessarily like artsy creativity. You're just a very creation geared mind, if that makes sense. And so the critical nature of this eclipse can make you feel like your creative output is being graded. You could find yourself stifling your own voice, for example, because it isn't perfect or useful enough. And you could be over analyzing maybe areas like romance or fun or creativity or play, trying to manage the performance of what you enjoy rather than just experiencing the joy of life. And you can navigate this energy by creating something strictly from the trash can. You could do bad art, silly writing, just to prove that you can be imperfect and that you don't need to manage everything. It's just the act of creation and the fun that it brings mentally that you can focus on, and allow yourself to play without an end goal or a critique of your performance, because your joy is not a project to be managed. Release the critic and let your inner child play without supervision. That is the number one advice I can give you during this transit. Mercury in the sixth house, you process information through the filter of function and system. You are the troubleshooter. When you look at a situation, you don't see the surface, you see the mechanics. Your lens is, how does this work? Is it broken? How can I make this more efficient? How does this fit into my day-to-day life? And you process reality by solving problems. If there is no problem to solve, your mind can feel restless or underutilized. And so this is the native house of Virgo, the sixth house. And so the lens here is very very microscopic. You could fall into the trap of pathologizing your own life, constantly scanning for the error in your health, your work, your routine. You might feel that you aren't fixing something well enough or that you're failing in some way. And so this eclipse, it turns your very helpful, troubleshooting mind into an exhaustive audit of your existence, really creating phantom problems just to solve them. That is the risk. And so you can help yourself by accepting that functional is better than optimal. If it works, if it ain't broke, do not fix it. Give your mind a day off from being the mechanic of your own life, even if it's just one day, so that you can process the emotions of this eclipse, because you are a human being, not a machine to be calibrated. And releasing the need to fix things that aren't actually broken that's kind of like the focus that you need to lean on during this transit. Mercury in the 7th house, you process information through the filter of relativity and feedback. You think very dialectically. You often don't know exactly what you think until you bounce it off of, somebody else or maybe another idea. You really need to weigh your thoughts, which isn't a bad thing. It's just the mechanism through which really helps you validate your ideas, because your lenses, how does this affect the world around me? Is this fair? What is the counter argument? And you process reality by constantly measuring your position kind of relative to someone else's to find the middle ground. You're very balanced. And so the Virgo eclipse introduces a jagged edge to your calibration. You could, find yourself mentally keeping score in your relationships, analyzing who did what and when, or maybe you're trying to weigh yourself and how you do connect and what your role within connection is. And you could be nitpicking that, whether you're single, in a relationship, have friends, business partners. It could be in multiple settings, and you could be projecting your own self-criticism onto other people at this time, or you could also feel paralyzed by the imperfect feedback you are receiving from others at this time. Maybe you can't trust everybody with their thoughts enough, and you're trying to renegotiate a messy emotional reality with dry logic and sharp critiques, which could be tough. And so you can manage this energy by speaking in statements such as "I feel" or "this is what I think," rather than questions like "do you think that this is true?" or whatever questions that you have. And so focus on your own internal balance at this time, rather than trying to perfectly balance the scales with other people in your life. And so relationships are organic, they're not geometric. Release the need for perfect symmetry and allow for human imbalance. And this can help you keep your emotional center at this time. Mercury in the 8th house, you process information through the filter of depth and transaction. You are kind of the detective with your house placement, even if, people don't always recognize that about you at first. And so when you are presented with facts, you immediately look for what is not being said. Your lenses, what is the motivation here? What is the power dynamic? What is the cost? And you process reality by digging for the truth that lies underneath the polite surface, really focused on the exchange of energy and whatever dynamic is happening. And so the Virgo eclipse can turn your psychological depth into paranoia if you're not careful. And so you could find yourself obsessing over a betrayal that hasn't happened, or trying to figure out a hidden mechanism of your own trauma. Even if the answer is right there, you could be digging and you could miss, what is actually happening. And you could be hyperfixated on shared finances or debts in a more literal interpretation, or you could feel a need to control the flow of energy or resources at this time to feel safe from the unknown. You are trying to illuminate the dark with a flashlight that is too bright, and it kind of washes out the picture. When you take a picture and the flash is too bright, it's kind of like that. And so you can channel this energy by researching a complex topic that has nothing to do with your personal life. Really give your mind a mystery to solve that will not hurt you, because this allows you to calibrate your mind at this time. And it helps you to distinguish between intuition and anxiety, because one feels calm, even if, the truth is a little bit, panicky, if that makes sense, but the other feels frantic on all levels. And so sometimes the truth is just the truth. Release the need to psychoanalyze every moment and trust the surface occasionally. And it's when you do that you could find the answers that you're seeking for, and it could help you emotionally regulate during this eclipse. Mercury in the 9th house, you process information through the filter of meaning and context. You are the philosopher. You do not care about an isolated fact. You care about how it fits into the grand theory of everything. Your lenses, is this true in a macro sense? What does this teach me? What is the meaning? How does this expand my world? How does this fit into the big picture? And you process reality by zooming out to find the moral or ethical framework that holds the data together, or the big picture, no matter if your sign is in Sagittarius or Virgo. And so this Virgo eclipse will force you to zoom in, which could feel claustrophobic, even if you have a Virgo Mercury. And so you could find that maybe your broad beliefs are being challenged by annoying specific details. And you could feel a crisis of confidence where you worry that you don't know enough facts to support your big ideas, or maybe you're questioning your reality, or maybe you're digging to find a truth and you're running into bumps, if that makes sense at this time. You could also maybe judge yourself at this time for being a jack of all trades, but a master of none. And you could fear that the way you learn isn't practical to the real world. Maybe you're a good learner, but you don't know how to put it in practice, if that makes sense. It's like you go to university, but what is your degree even worth in some cases? And you could navigate this transit by really admitting that the details are the bricks to build the temple. And respecting the small facts without getting caught up in them is key for you. Use this time to refine your philosophy with actual data rather than just rejecting it, because wisdom will include the boring stuff. Release the spiritual arrogance that ignores the fine print to help you build a stronger truth, but do not get caught in it. If you do learn something new, do not feel like you have to run away from it, because it could be teaching you a truth that really expands your mind and helps you to emotionally regulate, especially through these crazy times. Mercury in the 10th house. You process information through the filter of authority and consequence. You are the strategist. And when you think, you are thinking about the end game. Your lens is, will this work? How will this be perceived? Is this reputable? Will this withstand the test of time? And you process reality by assessing its impact on your goals or your standing in the world. And you value competence and visible results above all else. And this Virgo eclipse could trigger a bout of imposter syndrome. That is the key for you at this time. You could feel some imposter syndrome. You could be viewing your life through the eyes of a critical boss figure. Maybe you're analyzing your career path for any potential failure points. You could just be having an existential crisis about what you are doing with your life. It's not necessarily very job oriented. It could just be existential, and you could be holding yourself to a standard of perfection that is kind of inhuman. You could worry that one small mistake could dismantle everything that you're building, or maybe you're worrying that your mind isn't enough, and you are essentially conducting a forensic audit of your own success at this time. And so the advice for you is that you can manage this energy by separating the version of you that is trying to achieve or build something in the world from your real self, and remind yourself that a critique of your work is not a critique of your soul. Set a boundary where maybe your analysis of who you want to be stops and your life that you can actually enjoy begins, because you are more than your resume, you're more than your achievements, you're more than what you want to do with your life. And releasing the need to be the authority figure who never makes a typo is kind of the key to emotional regulation at this time. Mercury in the 11th house, you process information through the filter of system and collective. And so you are kind of the architect with this placement. You think in terms of networks, groups, and maybe even future timelines. Your lens is, does this work for the group? Does it work for society? Is this progressive? How does this fit into the big picture? You might not even be thinking on a societal level, but you like to see how your details fit into a bigger picture at the very least. And you process reality by detaching from the personal and looking at the structural integrity of maybe your long-term goal, your dreams, or the community that surrounds it. And so this Virgo eclipse could make you hypercritical of your friends or your social circles, or even your dreams or your contribution to society. And you could find yourself analyzing the efficiency of maybe your peer group or your goals, and you could feel alienated because you see the flaws in the system that everybody else ignores, and you do not know how to do what to do about it, and you could be hypercritical of yourself because of that. And you could find yourself stressing over the logistics of a future dream, really trying to engineer a perfect path or a goal that is still years away. And so the danger is becoming cynical about whatever cause or, role that you're trying to achieve. And you can handle this energy by focusing on one concrete step that you can make today towards your dreams. Just focus on that one step. Do not focus on the rest rather than like trying to save the whole world, because this could overwhelm you at this time. Allow maybe friends or groups, if this is relevant, to be imperfect rather than efficient. And this could help you, maybe be more forgiving in terms of your progress and your role within the communities that you currently sit in. And so the future is built by humans. And you are a human. It's not built by an algorithm. And so you need to like embrace yourself as a human and even use that humanistic quality in your vision. And so release the need for your community or your ideas to be flawless, because if you can find the value in this, no matter what that is the key to emotional regulation at this time. Mercury in the 12th house, you process information through the filter of the abstract and the unseen. You're kind of like an antenna. You don't like think in a very linear line, although you could, but it's going to be a very different linear line than somebody who doesn't have a 12th house Mercury. You more so absorb knowledge through the atmosphere and you filter it that way. And your lenses, what is the vibe, what is unspoken, what, like, more than just like what is in front of me, how does this like connect to something bigger and more unseen? And you process reality by drifting through it, which could make it hard because you're not taught to mentally process things that way. And you can pick up on intangible signals and emotional undercurrents that logic often misses. You have to be aware of this mindset, or maybe you could get confused in your own mindset. And so the Virgo eclipse is trying to force your ocean into a bottle, and you might feel a clash between your intuitive knowing and the world's demand for proof at this time. You could be trying to rationalize your dreams or your anxiety, which could lead to a feedback loop of confusion, because Virgo, it likes to hyperanalyze. And you could feel that your mind is foggy because it is trying to process too many intangible signals at once, yet it's feeling the pressure to make sense of them. And so you can survive this transit by finding, an outlet that allows you to filter the information more passively, whether it's sleeping or meditating, as cliche as it sounds, or just spending time alone with your thoughts without, hyper analyzing them, but just letting them flow through you, because your mind needs to process in the dark. Do not force yourself to translate your feelings into logic right now. Let them remain abstract until the fog clears. And so you have to, accept that there are some things that you cannot explain, and trying to not explain them could actually be the thing that helps you filter those thoughts and translate them in a way that truly helps you not only to understand what your mind is trying to tell you, but can help you emotionally regulate at this time.